January 1st, 1937. Recently, I'm very busy. They are beating at my door right at this minute because I have to send $165 to the landlord. I sold 2 very beautiful paintings at a low price, but it doesn't matter. If everything turns out as I planned, the works I've drawn. Saturday, 18th, 1937. They bought one of my paintings for $650, but I haven't yet received the money. January 1st, 1937. My subject matter is directional. American plains are horizontal. New York City, which I live in, is vertical. In the middle of my picture stands a column which symbolizes the determination of the American nation. February 28th, 1938. These days, a melancholic mood has taken hold of me. Sunday, August 11th, 1940, New York City. Recently, I've been working, and my way of working is changing, and for this reason, I always feel extremely anxious. I want to attain works which are more personal and clean. And I've painted my portrait. I've given my eyes the shapes of leaves. Every day, you are...
I was 19 when I first met Gorky. I was told by Bill de Kooning that I must meet Gorky. So I went, and I sat down quietly in this room full of people next to a gentleman with a mustache. He was nice and tall. And he said, "Is your name Magruder, Miss Magruder?" I said, "Not quite, but it's Magruder." And he said, "Well, I was asked to meet you." I said, "Well, hello." And he said, "Tell me about yourself." And I said, "There's nothing to tell. I'm just beginning my life in New York." I had been so lost in New York, like a feather being blown about. I was a complete loner until I met Gorky. He loved New York. He took me all over New York. We explored every corner of New York, always by foot. Before my time, Gorky used to hang out at a bar over on the east side of the village.
In the mid to late 1930s, Gorky was part of a milieu that centered on the Romany Marie's Tavern, where artists including Willem de Kooning, Stuart Davis, John Graham, and Isamu Noguchi would hang out. Isamu Noguchi was a Japanese-American sculptor. The crux of his friendship with Gorky is their shared feeling of being not entirely American. This was a sense of national dislocation that they shared. Upon his arrival in New York, Gorky told everybody that he was Russian, that he had studied with Vasily Kandinsky, that he was a cousin of Maxim Gorky. And it's interesting to speculate on why he would have done this. There was certainly a stigma against Armenian immigrants at the time.
So then he took me to his studio. It was so big and so vast and empty. 3 chairs and a round table and this wonderful big easel, great big one, like a crucifix, and a big window coming right down from the ceiling. It must have been right away that I wanted to see his paintings. Oh, I was absolutely stunned by his painting. I'd never seen painting like it. I mean, it was delicious. He'd taken the canvas off the stretchers, and he said, "Just feel this." And it was so heavy I couldn't hold it. I said, "I'm going to drop it on the floor," and it's covered with paint, and it'll all crack. And he said, "Take it away," and he took it away and pinned it back up, and he said, "That's all paint." And his paintings were, you could judge them by weight if you wanted to. Part of his technique at the time when I first met him, he emptied the tubes of color into different bowls, and they were sat in his windowsill in the light, and it formed a skin on the top to paint with. He painted each painting sometimes only for an hour, and then he put it to dry. Sometimes everything changed overnight. I started to live with Gorky shortly after I met him. Inevitably, you see, I made friends so easily with the kind of people, in a way, he wanted to be accepted by. They belonged in the establishment because they were Americans. I mean, people like Jean Reynaud. I was the connecting link.
Gorki and Mougouch began to build a social circle in common. One of their mutual friends was the mosaic artist Jean Renal. She was an artist as well as a woman of means, and so she was able to act as a patron and advocate for her artist friends.
Jean Renal was very struck by Gorki, and right away she bought 2 paintings, just like that. And those paintings, she gave them to the San Francisco Museum and arranged this exhibition in San Francisco. So, Isamu drove us to California.
June 23rd, 1941, New York City. Next Tuesday, together with some friends, I'm going to San Francisco by car. A few days ago, a dear friend of mine came here, an artist, and my paintings pleased her a great deal, and she bought one and immediately gave me $500. And she invited us out there, and I will be able to paint there this summer. It would be wonderful. It's been 16 years since I've been out of New York.
Gorki was very nervous about leaving New York. It was home.
The road trip for both Gorki and Noguchi was a real turning point. They get into Noguchi's new station wagon, and they're all sitting in the front seat of the car. There are anecdotes about Gorki and Noguchi kind of bickering the entire way across the country. They were having intellectual debates. And one of the most interesting and I think telling anecdotes is their debate about the images that Gorki was seeing in the clouds. He was seeing an old peasant woman in the clouds. At one point, we're pulled off to the side of the road arguing about the images that were in the clouds. I think there was a bit of jealousy on Gorki's part of the friendship between Noguchi and Mougouch. Maybe Mougouch had sided with Noguchi in some of these debates in the car, and that had made Gorki feel insecure about their relationship.
First time he'd gone that far, by the time he got to Mississippi, he was ready to go back. We were only halfway there. He suddenly wanted to get out of the car and throw himself into the river. He was too far from New York. He felt terribly adrift.
Before his road trip with Noguchi, Gorki was working on abstract paintings that were very inspired by Miro. They had a lot of biomorphic forms which he related to elements from his village. So it's interesting that at this time he was drawing on imagery like butter churns, trees, orchards, and directly naming Corkum in some of the paintings that he showed in San Francisco. But nobody put together that this was where he had come from, that it wasn't in Russia.
He told me the story of his life and so on, with emendations. He talked a lot about the Caucasus as though he'd spent his life on a horse, which he hadn't. They were very happy, on the whole, his memories. That's what he chose to tell me about. Climbing trees and looking for birds' nests. All those paintings sent to San Francisco Museum was sort of his memory of how the garden looked in his father's orchard.
The walls of the house in Russia where I was born and spent my childhood were made of clay blocks. In this culture, there was no need, with the exception of the lentil period, for a formal calendar. In the ceiling was a round aperture to permit the emission of smoke. Over it was placed a wooden cross from which was suspended by a string an onion, into which 7 feathers had been plunged. As each Sunday elapsed, a feather was removed, thus denoting the passage of time. Through these elevated objects, floating feather and onion, was revealed to me for the first time the marvel of making the common the uncommon.
Gorki has been really unimpressed with the American landscape up to this point.
The mountains were not the right shape. They didn't look like the Caucasus, and therefore they weren't mountains. They didn't register. The high Sierras in the distance left him absolutely cold. This was very funny.
His feeling was that it was too much the same. The Grand Canyon was something that Gorky and Mougouch both found too big. This is a fascinating moment where we see Gorky literally turn his back with Mougouch on the Grand Canyon and begin to look at nature in a more microscopic way, looking at leaves, looking at the grass, very close up, at the same time that he's bringing in personal memories. So there's this real kind of shift from the macro to the micro that I think is a direct outcome of this encounter with the American landscape. Gorky, Noguchi, and Mougouch stop at a Hopi reservation. They stay the night there. And when they stay at the Hopi reservation, that's the moment where Gorky first feels some sense of recognition. He sees adobe ovens that are reminiscent of the stoves in his Armenian village. And that is a moment for him where he begins to connect his own personal memories to the American landscape and what he's seeing out west on this road trip.
I was taken away from my little village when I was 5 years old, yet all my vital memories are of these first years. These were the days when I smelt the bread. I saw my first red poppy, the moon, the innocent seeing. Since then, these memories have become iconography. The shapes, even the colors, millstone, red earth, yellow wheat field, apricots.
It's interesting to speculate on whether Gorky would have recognized in the treatment of Native Americans in this country an echo of what the Armenians had been put through during the Armenian genocide.
Gorky always said his mother died of starvation.
The song of the cardinal, liver, mirrors that have not caught reflection, the aggressively heraldic branches, the saliva of the hungry man whose face is painted with white chalk.
He told me they had to leave their farm with his mother and his sister. He was a young boy fleeing with thousands of other people on the road. But of course, I didn't know his real name anyhow until after he was dead, so that was that. And found that his real name was Vostanig Adoyan, which is also a nice name. He wanted to become an American. He didn't want to ever say that he was an Armenian.
Keeping a secret that big for that long and not being able to talk about just a horrific experience that shaped your life must have been just a tremendous burden.
I wanted to go west to San Francisco, where I thought I could get a boat. In my own mind, I was going to China and become a journalist and write about Mao Zedong, who was then on his long march while the Chinese and Japanese war was going on. America hadn't gotten into the war yet, you see. When we got to San Francisco, that was a slightly difficult time because Gorky was so upset. He thought he'd gone out there to be in this great wild world. Jeanne had said she was living in the country, you see, with Fred Thompson. And then she changed her mind before we got to California, and she had another fellow, so that she wasn't living on this ranch, where Gorky was rather looking forward to being in the Western landscape, instead of which he was in a rather ladylike studio in San Francisco, not a door where he could paint.
July 20th, 1941. Today is the 4th day that I'm in San Francisco, and I'm going mad because my friends told me that when we arrived here, they would have found me a place to live and I would have painted for 3 months. Afterwards, there would have been an exhibition, But I don't think this is going to happen. It seems that I have to pay for all the expenses. And therefore, I'll have to pay $250 just for transport from New York to here. This is a mistake. I've never made such a mistake in all my life. My dear friends perhaps wanted to come here anyway, and to lessen the expenses, they took me with them. And they've only just told me this.
Well, I didn't enjoy it when he didn't enjoy it. It made life very, very difficult. I didn't know what to do. Well, then I had an abortion, and it rather upset me. And it upset Gorky terribly. He was so sad. Well, I was a bit too free. I mean, I really was lost. I was rather young. But I mean, everything was all entirely against the law. Jean found the right place for me. It was down on the waterfront in San Francisco. When I came back, I was really quite sick, because they don't put you out entirely. They scrape your poor womb, because they had to be able to pick you up if the police raided the place. And I, of course, had a high fever and felt awfully badly.
August 4th, 1941. Though my last letter was very desperate, now everything is much better, and I have met a lot of people, and others have said they are working for me and for my success. Agnes is working hard so that my exhibitions will be successful, which will open on the 9th of this month.
Gorky receives a solo show at the San Francisco Museum of Art that's really a turning point in his career. He's beginning to exhibit work with more of an autobiographical element while still being abstract. So on one hand, we see portraits of his sister and his mother, a portrait of Mougouch, all in kind of a realist style, but he's also exhibiting his Garden in Corcombe series. This is a real turning point for him in terms of building his own biography into his painting while still working in an abstract way, making a direct reference to the village where he grew up. Reviews of the exhibition indicate that Gorky was a major figure in the New York art scene. They pitch him as a student of Kandinsky, as Russian-born. He's seen as this next wave of American artists who are taking the lessons of the European avant-garde and interpreting them in an American context.
Jean was pressurizing me tremendously to marry him. Well, because she thought that I was the only person who could make Gorky happy. She said, it's the best thing you could possibly do with your life. What are you going to do? Go and be a journalist? As though there isn't plenty of people being journalists. I mean, why should you be a journalist? But here's a genius, and he needs somebody to help him. And she knew I helped him. And he loved me, after all. And then I decided I would marry him. And we went to the mountains with Jean, and that's how we went to get married.
September 12th, 1941. This morning, Agnes and I went with two friends to Tag City to get married.
I bought the ring in the 5 and 10. They wouldn't believe it was brass. I said, it's a curtain ring. They thought I was joking. I said, if you look at my finger, it's a little bit green underneath. It's proof. It's not gold.
We're very happy. The forests there are big lakes and torrents with clear running water, rushing through the stones and rocks, and beside the torrents are enormous cypress trees, as still as sentinels with their heads in the cloud. They seem to press upwards against the blue of the sky to stop the bright blue sky from one day falling down. We're very happy, and Agnes is a very beautiful and well-educated girl and has studied in Switzerland, France, England, Holland, and has visited every country in the world. In a week, we will return to New York, and we will live in the same studio.
After his road trip is a greater sense of landscape and of depth. We immediately see it in a work like Mojave, where we have identifiable, sort of biomorphic forms, similar to those that appear in the Garden in Saki series, but whereas those abstract forms are all sort of on the surface of the painting, in Mojave we have a clearly identifiable horizon line, we have suggestions of, maybe a sun. It's more of a landscape.
He was having a very healthy life for the first time. I think that helped. He wasn't eating in cafeterias and drinking a lot of coffee and a lot of fried food.
As Gorky's family life blossomed, so did his art, and I think in large part that was because his family increasingly drew him from the city out into the country. They were visiting Mougouch's family farm at Crooked Run in Virginia, which was where he was finding his inspiration.
We'd go in the spring and we'd watch the fall turning. He fell in love with the grasses and the cows and the trees and the weeds. I mean, he couldn't get over the beauty of the milkweed.
At this kind of pivotal period in the mid-1940s, the contact with nature fed Gorky's creative development to create the hybrid images that would become his mature vocabulary.
What was so exciting about it was that he didn't know what he was doing himself. He'd come back and he'd say, "Can you see this?" "Well, I'm looking at it. It's wonderful. It's extraordinary." There was so much feeling in it, and the feeling came through to one. You could see how nature was alive to him. I mean, he saw things in it, like things that he might have seen in his dreams or imagination. Always a mixture of his early memories and his new perceptions.
There's certainly the emphasis on the unconscious in Gorky's work. The looseness of his paint handling is what allows him to really channel his emotions and translate the feelings that he's having before nature. Gorky was so methodical in his plotting of his paintings and the creation of drawings, the gridding up of the studies for his paintings, and finally the translation into paint. And I think his real genius was making it look effortless and spontaneous. It's that level of expressiveness that positions him at this juncture between surrealism and abstract expressionism, but really standing on his own and remaining independent as an artist.